Welcome to Is This on the Test, a podcast where we debunk myths about modern education. We are your hosts, Anthony Tavares,
Katarina Pardo,
Henry Flores,
and Madai Martinez.
We are the creative team behind Union City Music and Dance, and this podcast is for parents, aspiring teachers, mentors, and students, where we pull back the curtain on education. Let's get right into it.
Let's go ahead and jump right on in. Yeah, and since this is our first podcast, I think it's important to introduce a little bit about who we are, how we got to be here, and not just UCMD, but how did we get involved in the arts. I think I can speak for all of us when we say we're super passionate about using the arts as such a catalyst for education and self-awareness, and the list goes on and on for all the positive things that the arts do for us. So just share a little bit with the audience as to who you guys are, what your role here at UCMD is, and kind of how you found yourself in this creative space.
Who wants to start?
Okay, I guess I will go first. Hi, everybody. Katarina Pardo here. I am the dance director here at UCMD. I'm also a dance mom at UCMD, but we'll talk more about that later. How I got involved in the arts was, I was actually a really shy kid growing up. And my parents wanted me to be involved in like extracurricular activities, and it was really hard for me because I was so shy. So every year, my mother would drag me to a recital of a certain dance studio every year, and I would just not go for it until one year I was 9 and I saw a flamenco number and said, all right, I'm in. And I've been hooked ever since. It's been part of my life ever since. I can't see my life without it now that I'm older. And my kids are in it now too, which is great.
Sounds awesome. Beautiful. I'll go next. My name is Anthony Tavares. I am the music director here at Union City Music and Dance. My main instrument is guitar. I've been playing guitar since I was 12, so a little around 10 years. Since along those 10 years, I've been enjoying music and mainly just playing guitar and just messing around with different genres and just messing around with different techniques. And I'm kind of glad to be sharing this with most of the students now. I do see the same magic that comes out of their eyes when I first started playing music, and I definitely do enjoy seeing that in their faces for sure. Still enjoying music, still coming up with new content with Henry, of course. But yeah.
I didn't introduce myself before. I'm Henry Flores, and similar stories. My music experience also began when I was very young. My mom put me in piano lessons when I was 4, and I pretty much never pulled out. Studied music in high school, studied music in college, and we'll talk about our musical educational sides later, but I think one thing that really kind of tied me into my journey here at UCMD was that I definitely, as I got older, recognized the impact that music had in my life. If it was not for music, I feel like I definitely could have gone down a very different path, especially like where I was growing up and like the circumstances that I was growing up in. And not so much as it was like a distraction, but just more of like something where I can do many things. It was a hobby, but it was a way for me to vent. Honestly, music is a way that I fidget. Sometimes I don't even really realize that I'm playing the instrument. It's like in the same way that someone would pick out their nails. Like I can kind of just play, but not even really be paying attention. So music has done a lot for me and has been a part of my life for so long. And although my plan wasn't always initially to teach, I studied more music performance. I've come to really, really love teaching. And as Anthony said before, it is something really magical about seeing that spark kind of ignite in a younger kid in a similar way to you. And then you kind of already start seeing how it could impact them and hopefully become something that they love as much as, we all do.
Yeah, I think the arts is something that is always calls you. I don't think you're like, oh, this thing that I have to do, oh my God, right? Yeah. And so my story is actually kind of funny. Madai speaking here. So ever since I was like super little, so my parents actually joked that I did dance actually before I took my first steps. just hanging on the back of the chair, like jumping up and down while we were still in Cuba. And I grew up in a very musical, artsy household. It was not uncommon for me to walk home and see my dad like making piñatas, or like then the next day they're making sandals, and then my grandfather was a composer. So it like is 100% through and through my family, and it's all of it. And I think that's what puts me in a unique position where I'm not very specific, like in depth as you guys are in your instruments or your craft. But I kind of have seen all of it at a different more surface level, I guess you could say. And when I was younger, obviously my parents didn't really have the means to really allow me to technically train when I was very little, at a very developmental age. And that's really important for dance specifically, because our bodies are different as we grow up, and our flexibility is different and all these things. But what I was more inclined to was quietly like drawing and doing like those little things. And because my parents were so busy, we had just come to this country. Shout out to immigrants out there. I felt that I had to be super like well behaved and like kept to myself, because I didn't want to like burden my parents in any way. And so I drew, I did choreographies, and I did all these things kind of on my own. And finally, it wasn't really till the 5th grade that my mom was able, they were already like kind of now more financially okay to put me in a organized institution. And I started becoming a student at UCMD. That was like my first entry point. But for the longest time, I knew that how I wanted my life to look. Funny. How I wanted my life to look, right, is that I wanted to establish my career, and then I was gonna open this nonprofit to help the arts and this whole thing, because I know that it did something really special for me. It was the arts was like my second set of parents. It was like my embrace, my like release. And so since I was very little, my mom recalls that I would say, I'm going to open up a dance studio. I guess I must have been manifesting it for a very long time. But after I became a student at UCMD and then became an instructor there years later, I would always joke with Maito, who was the owner of UCMD at the time, I'm going to buy this from you one day. Again, on my manifesting game, I didn't know that years later that actually was going to come to fruition. And here we are. So it was kind of like a lot of set of very unique circumstances that aligned to kind of allow us to have this space to be here. And we can divulge into more of that story. But yeah, I think it put me in a very unique place to be able to be here guiding and opening and crafting. And I think what was important to me and why this is pertaining to the podcast is I hated traditional education. I was always a curious kid, but I didn't like the way that it felt. You know, like I think school was way too like rigid and structured, and if you didn't fit into this box, then you were like an outlier that sucked, and you weren't gonna amount to anything in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Have we had those situations where either teachers or instructors or someone be like, "You're not gonna be anything," and then, geez, like what that does to a child, right? So any stories there as to kind of what your traditional school education was in very drastic comparison to what maybe you guys were doing in the arts?
I can go first for this one.
Yeah.
So one thing that we've definitely talked about before. I was actually talking to the parents recently about, and because the parents brought it up, and I agreed that the traditional education system, and again, as we'll dive more into in more in depth a little later on, it's flawed in the sense that it's only it teaches like one way of learning, and there's many different ways to learn. I'm gonna butcher this analogy, but if I think it's like if you put like a bird and like a frog, and you tell them both to fly, only the bird's gonna succeed, and the frog is gonna like grow up thinking it sucks because it doesn't know how to fly, but it's great at many other things that it was never asked to do or try. Again, I don't know if that's even the right thing, but all in all, to say that there's only one way of learning, and many students definitely succeed in that kind of learning. My sister, for example, we're like very different in the way that we learn. My sister was very book smart, if we want to call it that. and like she totally thrived. For me though, like I found that I struggled. I got good grades, but like at what cost? You know, like I would come out of like tests stressed out, and like I would have to like go over like things like many times to like really grasp it. But then I found that in music, and not even just music, but like different ways of like learning, I really enjoy it, especially like even after school. Like I've learned so many things just on the internet, off YouTube. I taught myself how to produce. I taught myself how to video edit. I taught myself how to build a computer. And like over time, more so after the fact, I've learned that learning really is a beautiful and like fun thing. So why does it feel so unfun and stressful in school? And that's because it's like a very like one track, very boxed in way of teaching, and therefore very one track way of thinking and then learning. And then if you don't kind of break out of it as you get older, you'll continue to live in that same way. One beautiful thing about music is that there's many avenues to learn. For example, again, my sister, she was very book smart, but she was still very good at music as well. She kind of stayed in the classical route, while my training was also classical, but then I broke into more like contemporary and jazz, more improv and stuff like that, while she didn't really go into that. So the one track way of learning could benefit you in music as well, but the beautiful thing is that there's so many different avenues that music can kind of help you realize that, oh, you don't really suck at learning, you just learn in a different way, which sometimes can take a really long time to learn, but you can learn that hopefully much earlier in your life through music and through the arts in general.
If I can butt in, the older that I'm getting, I'm starting to realize that I do like to learn, but just sometimes the topics and the subjects that they do teach in school don't really interest me as much as other things. Like Henry mentioned before, I do like going on YouTube and watching like YouTube videos. If I'm learning something new on guitar, I'll go on YouTube, how to play this on guitar, how to play this scale on guitar. I'll figure it out, and whatever I just learned from YouTube, I can apply it in so many different ways that school probably wouldn't even have taught me in our reality.
Yeah, another conversation that I had with Maddie, again, the
Shout
official
out to Maddie.
namer of this podcast. Thank you, Maddie. She mentioned, we had a long conversation about what is it that you learn in school, right? And she was like, again, as a trained teacher, certified teacher, she was like, school is there to help you critically think. And I was like, really? That's what we're trying to do? Oh, because that's missing the mark on some very, very deep levels. And that's when I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Let's zone all the way out. And the reason I think part of that teachers are burnt out is because you go into this profession thinking you're going to impact this kind of change. And that's the last thing you're doing. You know, education is right now it's a lot of red tape. It's a lot of bureaucracy. It's a lot of babysitting, honestly. And I think that's why the good teachers are leaving, and we're seeing this as a crisis currently in today's modern world. And this is a problem that we do have to address, because when masses of people are quitting and masses of people are saying no to this, then we have to address what the real root of the problem here is. And I think that's part of why this podcast was born, because these are conversations we've been having for a very long time. And we try to combat this with UCMD and the programs we do here. So I guess my question back is, what the critically thinking and the whole idea of like zooming out and connecting dots, right? Which is what technically school's intended to do for us. Right now, I see it a lot of like memorization, and like kids are very like one track mind, do the thing, da da da, da da da, again, da na 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 na, and so the arts is as far as routine as you can get. Of course, you have like your classical, like with ballet, things are very structured and very technique based. But I think with the arts, the way that I've come to understand and love it for what that is first you learn the rule, and then you learn how to break it real well. That's like essentially what the arts are. And so I want to hear from you guys as to maybe your own personal experiences in this traditional, because school's been this way for a long time. We went through it, it's not changing, and we don't know what the foreseeable change is going to be. So how do you, as now instructors on the other end, think about that contrast of maybe the education you got versus now the education now you're giving? And what about, kind of like we either turn up exactly like our parents or completely opposite? How does that shift how you now navigate this world, and how you impact change, and how do you bridge gaps for students that don't have this type of education? Or how do you see a kid that's like ADHD and you're like, this kid's not that, they're just fucking bored.
Yep.
They're just bored.
Right.
Thus enter UCMD, thus enter all the wonderful work that artists and creators are doing, and how we're kind of saving them in a sense.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I'll go first once again. So that was 3 questions.
Sorry,
no,
1,
okay.
2, 3.
But they're all connected, and I'll try and hit on each one. So the first thing is that at least for me, so I'm done with my schooling. Although even that concept right there, right? We never really finished learning ever.
Never.
But we do have this kind of Western way of thinking where okay, you have this chapter of your life which is learning, and then you have this chapter of your life which is still a different kind of learning, to more or less kind of be an employee kind of learning, and then you work and then you die. And me and Madar were talking about that really isn't the case everywhere. It's definitely a Western way of thinking. If you go overseas and you go to the more East Asian ways of thinking, the whole concept of retiring is not really a thing, because it's well, if you're doing something that you enjoy doing, and my mom is definitely this way. I could do whatever for my mom, buy her a house, whatever. She's gonna still find work because she doesn't want to sit and do nothing. And overseas, it's a little further. Well, if you do the concept of well, let me do this thing I hate for 60 years, so I can collect my retirement and then enjoy life. That's insane. By the time you finally get there, are you really living a fully a full life? And so if we rewind that back to the schooling, we're supposed to be taught critical thinking, and I've had great teachers who definitely have impacted my life forever. And I think those teachers that you do remember are those teachers who really give a damn.
Right.
They're let me make a change in this kid's life.
Probably low-key hated while you were...
Yeah.
Exactly.
You don't appreciate these teachers in that moment at all. And I'm sure we're probably already that kind of teacher to some kids already, which is great. I don't mind
Thank you for hating us.
Yeah,
we love you.
Getting that praise
We
now,
do.
because it's not about now anyway. It's about you kind of taking that and bringing it with you in your life. So as a musician or as an artist or anything, I think one thing that really differentiates from the schooling that we see, especially now, is that it's a lot of memorization. It's a lot of this all right, well, retain this information for when you finally do use it. The cool thing about music is that it's you learn the thing and then you apply it almost immediately. It's the learning and the application simultaneously, right? As you learn the building blocks of said chord or a progression or a scale, you're also going to immediately do that scale, progression, and so on in the song or in whatever piece you're doing, as opposed to sometimes in learning, we learn this thing, which they tell us we're going to use in the future, but until then, well, let's give you this test. So, we can make sure that you know how to do said thing until you encounter it in the future. And that's not to say that's the case with every subject and every grade, but that's definitely a central way of learning that isn't exactly great, because I can definitely remember many points in my life where I've hardcore memorized something for an exam, taken that exam, and that information is gone. As soon as I hand the test in, it is gone, because that was, well, if that's the method of learning that is rewarded, right? Then that's the method of learning that I and many kids are gonna use, because what benefit is there to really sit down and make all those index cards? No, not really. I at least at the time, at least in the schooling, this was more so in high school. Yeah, just learn it really quick right before on the spot, ace that test, and
Sorry to interrupt.
yeah.
I feel like you might have renamed this podcast low key just to, is this gonna be on the test?
Ooh, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, right?
Word.
When in life are you
Welcome back to Is This Going to Be on the Time?
Do we need to know this? Is
you?
this
But tell me, no, that you've
necessary?
definitely been in
yeah.
college class. You're yo, is it gonna be on test?
Yeah.
Like, do I need to be receptive right now?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And therein lies the problem. Like, do you ask, is this going to be on the test when you're like learning a dance technique, when you're learning music, when you're learning
No,
how
you're just in it.
to code, art, anything? Like,
Yeah.
we don't really ask that anywhere else
Right.
aside
Right.
from this very like strict academic structure. And it's exactly what Madai said. Like, do I have to be receptive right now? Do I really care about this information? Am I going to use it, or am I just like absorbing it like at the bare minimum surface level to then regurgitate it onto this piece of paper and get my grade, which
Right.
at least at the time was like my self-worth at the time, right? Like you're grading.
Yeah, A, B, C.
Which
That's
is
it.
which is another problem in and of itself, which I'm sure we'll touch on.
Letters as currency.
Yeah.
Lord.
And then yeah.
Let me get me started.
And then to segue that into the other point before I pass it on, and I can kind of connect these two, like, well, one, how do we break away from our parents' method of learning, and also how do then we break that chain in our method of teaching? And it can be teaching, it can be parenting, any kind of mentorship, right? The way that we teach is usually the way we are taught. The way, I'm not a parent, but the way we do parent or eventually parent is the way we are parented, right? Like there isn't really you can definitely learn parenting skills, but it all really comes down to what you experience. So I've definitely learned a tremendous amount of things from my mom and from my teachers, but there's definitely things, as I grow as a teacher, as an instructor, as someone who will potentially eventually be a parent, there are definitely things that I'm gonna kind of pick and fine tune. There are definitely things that are very valuable, but there are a lot of things that I can leave out. I think learning should remain a beautiful thing, so we don't view it as this like learning chapter of our lives that we move on from. And I think there should be a lot less trauma involved with the learning process, whether it be from parenting or from schooling. I feel like, at least for me, high school was a very intense, very traumatic time in my life, and I wish it wasn't. I can look back on it and like pick out the thankful, good moments, but there was like a lot of not great things. So I, as a teacher, try to cut all that stuff out. Keep the important lessons that I think you do have to teach, but trim out the excess that I think we don't need.
For sure.
Beautifully said.
Henry took the cake on this one.
Yeah, Henry is amazing with words.
Honestly, gonna yo.
Well, I guess
I
what
mean-
I would say is
Don't
just
forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
to us.
yeah. So
Yeah.
more on tradition. The importance, I guess, we're talking about is really the importance of. It's kind of sad to say that we're battling, and this is an uphill battle to like unlearning. We're not teaching. We're unlearning. Like we're helping them unlearn so many things. So I guess just touching on non-traditional.
I was gonna say
spaces.
the last thing I would want is for any one of our students to come in here and hate music, dance, or
Right.
any sort of art because we instruct like a certain technique or a certain ruling on them. When in reality, personally, I think art is just really more so expressing yourself from your soul. Like I'm pretty sure you can all relate. And like we mentioned before, it's all about understanding the technique and the very basic fundamentals. But once you understand all of that, and you can take those techniques and fundamentals and apply it to your own way, I think that's what's really the most beautiful thing about art. And that's what I really want to make sure that all of our students understand, because if they don't, then I feel like they miss the whole purpose of taking a music, dance, or an art lesson overall.
Right.
Very nicely put. That should be in the forefront for sure. So why are these traditional spaces so important? Non-traditional spaces important.
I mean, for me, funny story, I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. Since I was a kid, they would ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would always say a teacher. But as I got older and I looked into what's behind teaching and how robotic it was and how like in this tiny little box it was, and I realized I'm not really teaching. I have to just follow like this little robotic thing, like, all right, we're gonna read the chapter and we're gonna do, like, there's not much teaching. They have to follow certain rules, certain restrictions, certain things. So I don't feel like as a teacher they can really express themselves the way they like. I know there's some teachers that would like to change curriculum and they can't because they have to follow this like dotted line, and it is the way it is. And I think that that's what's so special about teaching dance, teaching music, singing, whatever it is we don't have to be inside the box. We can have the students do it as they please, how they feel, especially like with me with lyrical and contemporary. The kids are really connecting now to meditating and affirmations and what that feels like. And I had a student tell me the last class, well, I wish we did affirmations and meditation in school. I wish that was something that we had because it makes me feel so good to know that I can express myself freely and then be able to take a class and express myself freely in class. And I feel like that's really sad where kids don't have that space in school where they can freely express themselves. Because again, they have to follow this dotted line, this curriculum. Teacher's right, sit there, listen to teacher, and that's that. And here, they don't have to do that. They can be free and they can express themselves. And I think it's really important for kids of all ages and even us as adults to be able to express ourselves with each other, you know?
Yeah, consistently. And that's key, right? Consistency in terms of like, we can all disagree. We do not have to agree. But I think the thing is how you're sharing that information, how we're learning consistently from each other, how we're learning from our different communication styles. Like, everything in life is about body language. It's about how you're presenting yourself. It's about all these different things. And we've, in society, forget school, because school is a very institutionalized thing that then institutionalizes society. Because if everybody has gone through this giant institutionalized filter, obviously this is the end of this thing. So now everybody thinks the same, we're processing the same, we're doing all those things, but then we get into our adulthood, and this is why this is important to have these conversations now, because this is the we're seeing these kids in their developmental stages. We're trying to avoid them of the trauma that maybe we have incurred through our education process, because now I'm questioning a lot of things about myself, and I'm like, man, I wish they touched on this in school. Wow. And that's why thus, programs like SEL, social emotional learning, which we do have at UCMD, why we then, with every year, it's kind of like we are growing and we're evolving, and we have a pulse on the reality, and we're not like blindsided by but we've done this for this long, and I'm like, all right, if it doesn't work now, throw it out the window.
It's okay to change.
Let's just change. Let's pivot to the actual time, because COVID was a real thing, and these things are affecting these kids, and the list goes on and on. Thus, what I love about us specifically is our ability to pivot with the time.
Pivot.
And thus, this is what debunking in a modern, that's what educating in a modern world looks like right now. We have to be flexible. We have to understand that if a student's like super, super, super like stressed out about this one thing, there's no piano chords in the world I'm going to put in this kid's head right now. There's no way we're going to be talking about pliés right now, No. And that always takes precedence. And I think at UCMD we're human first, and that's what really sets us apart. And I hope that comes across in all the messaging, and I think that's why we wanted to have these conversations more forward-facing to the parents, to the students, to anyone that hears us, because this is who we are, and this is really what we truly believe. Beautiful. I love that you brought up the ikigai concept.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that Kundalini thing, but I was going to let you get to that. You feel like you know more about it.
No, please share your experiences, share what you're learning.
Dang.
Ooh, Anthony on the spot.
Honestly, I'm not really learning much education-based. I mean, I am going to school for music education. Still second-guessing it because, honestly, just being here and where I'm able to create my own curriculum, I feel like what I'm doing works best rather than what I've seen other guitar teachers do for their students. I do enjoy the freedom and the creativeness that I have over here, so I appreciate you for that, Madai. Yeah, I'm not really that big of a fan of working in the schooling system because personally, I mean, that's why I'm sitting in this podcast. I don't really like school that much, to be honest with you. It's very systematic. I feel like everybody's molded the same in school. A lot of people don't like it for the exact reason. It's very, very boring. We're learning math, science. What else do you learn in school? Social studies.
ELA.
English. I mean, don't get me wrong. Math
Gym class.
What is gym
and
class?
gym. Don't get me wrong. They're very important to an extent. But once you're outside of school, where are you really applying science if you're not trying to become a scientist?
Yep.
I mean, math I definitely think is very important because you're always dealing with something of numeric value, whether it's money or Henry was saying coding, which is technology now. A lot of math.
Percentages of things and ability, all that good stuff.
Math. But yeah, I mean, back to what I was saying earlier, like, I do realize, like, going to school and being around that time where it was just a very 4 basic subjects, I didn't like school for that exact reason. But now that I'm a little older, I'm starting to realize I like different subjects like philosophy and psychology. And those types of things schools didn't really teach me. Again, I went online and go on YouTube and I search things up for myself, and just finding like different resources where I can learn from. I think that works best for me. Yeah. You know, I don't want to get too deep onto this education.
Yes, we're gonna have a lot to talk
a lot
about.
to say.
This is only like the
We'll
tip
get
of the
there.
iceberg.
We're trying to get a.
And again, our role here in having these conversations in a more public setting is so that you guys get to experience it on this side. Experience what goes into our meetings, what are we taking into consideration when we're doing our programming? You know, what are we thinking about when we do curriculum? What are the questions we're asking ourselves, and what are we doing?
Siri's like, she's about to search that question up.
Right. She's like, hold on, let me find this.
Yeah.
Siri said, "Give me one moment, please."
So
Yeah.
I think as we start to wrap up, I think you guys are incredible, and I think we all bring something different to the table, and that's why this works so well. Because we are different and we celebrate those differences, and we've only learned to do that because we are artists. Because as an artist, you have a different kind of heart. I don't care what anybody says. Like,
This is true.
I have a question for all of you.
So,
When you guys were in elementary school, middle school, high school, did you guys enjoy reading at all?
no.
This for
Would
us or
you
the listener?
for you guys?
For-
Also for the listeners, so
Yeah,
I don't see why
me,
not.
Yeah, I didn't.
I didn't really enjoy reading until like high school, because
You
again,
got better books?
right? No, not only did I get better books, but
Or
I
can
did.
choose.
I did have an English teacher in high school that really made a difference, and he made an impact in my life. So shout out to Mr. Musanti.
Shouts out.
He
Handle.
he changed the way I looked at reading, and he made it fun for us. We were allowed to express ourselves, and we were allowed to question things, and it wasn't like, read the chapter, write me an essay. No, this is just the way the book is. We can't question the writer. Like, he went outside the box. He got in trouble for it, but he was that teacher that went outside of the box and had us question, why are we
geniuses do.
yeah, why are we reading this BS? Like, why is this read in schools? We should be reading these things. And we actually read books that were banned because we went to a Catholic school. So he was allowing us to read things that were not, on the summer reading list.
Education.
But they actually became some of my favorite books now that I still read to this day. So I'm really thankful for that. But no, I did not enjoy reading until high
agree.
school.
Shouts to Mr. Hanover, my English teacher. We read the electric Kool-Aid acid test in high school.
Okay.
Yo, I'm not even ask.
I was reading Lord of the
where
Flies.
It was a bunch of hippies dropping acid on a school bus,
Excellent.
and it was like the journey of
Excellent.
of that. So it was a great book. I loved it.
Yeah.
High school freshman year.
We got in trouble for acting out Lord of the Flies. You haven't read that book? Read it.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Um,
But yeah, we got into yeah. It was good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, I didn't really. Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't really enjoy reading that much, especially like throughout my schooling. I found a lot of like I just equated books with school, and I didn't really enjoy school, so I didn't enjoy books. But I think the first time I was like, "Whoa!" is when I had to read The Giver, and I was like, "Whoa!" That was like the first time where like a book had me like mad intrigued. And then. I definitely in high school there was like we still had like the summer reading and like things, but it was like you could pick, like it was like read 3 out of these 10 or 3 out of these 6. But I definitely have been reading more now. I also used to read super slow, so it was like it was a chore to read anyway. Definitely read a bit faster now. But yeah, I mean I didn't really enjoy reading because it just had to do with school, and if I had to do with school, I didn't find it very fun.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's the point of your question, Anthony?
No, I was just
Just
curious
wants to be
because
like to
honestly, I didn't like reading growing up either. I feel like I was reading because I had to answer questions at the end of
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
I was like,
Yeah.
all right, I gotta memorize this because this question's asking for it.
Yeah.
But that's
And
Go
like,
ahead.
That's the
It-
system
it-
permeating.
it-
into
That's the
into
box.
it
book.
kills
There
the
it
fun
is.
out of
Let you
reading
really
because
enjoy it.
if I ever opened up a book, if I'm like, I don't have to answer any questions.
Ooh, you can relax.
Close this,
Right.
put it away, and I don't want to do that. I
Me
feel
too,
like
and then this is gonna be on
like
Yeah, is it Miranda's?
reading. I've come to realize is exercising the mind, and obviously the older you get, if you're not exercising your mind, that knowledge is gonna go.
No,
It's
for
gonna go
real.
so
Right.
downhill.
But that's what music does too.
Yes.
It's like
Right.
constant synapses like going.
Yeah, for
Of,
sure.
like because you have to be so aware of what you're
Right.
doing, hyper aware.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all intertwined.
It's funny you say that though, because Yumi, shout out to Yumi, I'm sure she'll be on this as well at some point. Her method of teaching students reading comprehension is she's like, I always tell them to go into the questions first, read the questions and on the test. Like if you're taking like an SAT or a standardized test thing where it's like time, that's the other messed up. Whatever. I'm not even gonna get into that. But where you have like it's like pushing this like anxiety ridden scenario, and then she's like, go into the questions, read what you're gonna do because you need to make decisions more quickly. So read the question, then go back knowing that the word secret is in it. So when you see the word secret,
Right.
circle it,
That's
highlight.
so fly.
You know, right?
Hey, gonna use that. Thanks, Yumi.
Right. But it works, but it's just messed up that we are having.
I definitely use that
think
method, but why should I read the questions before I read my main
Yeah.
source of information?
Because again, everything's a means to an end, and we have built a society that's everything's a means to an end. What are you gonna do for me? What's the exchange? What's this? And that removes us from our natural way of being a human.
Yeah. It's very unnatural.
And that's why art is so intuitive and so beautiful because it brings us back to self.
I was gonna say that. I definitely do think art really helps you express yourself. Maybe you guys could relate. I feel like the most creative people are usually the most humblest and sometimes the most nicest people you'll ever meet.
Yeah, because
Katrina thinks otherwise. Not
They're very in tune with
No.
themselves.
I
You said
don't know.
no?
There's some people I met that aren't that nice, but we're pretty cool people, I gotta say.
Some.
She said some.
It varies.
Most. Majority. It's just like,
All right, so let's wrap up. So, because again, we have subjects for days. We can go into divulging really like all these different things, and it's not just about highlighting the flaws. It's now we want to offer creative solutions. So it's not just being like, this is messed up. Deal with it. You know. I think now what our role here is being like we've assessed that there's a gap. There's some things missing, and we propose these kinds of changes, even if it's here, even if it's just with the amount of students that we have. You know, we wish that we could clone ourselves and work with more students, or maybe go virtually. Maybe that's an option at some point, but manifesting it. But I think these are things that we just want to bring to your attention, and we want that you as parents at home are aware, because I think in a lot of times parents are busy and you guys don't really see everything that's going on in public schools. You don't see kind of what these kids are doing, how they're being educated, and by the time that we do, maybe it's too late. So we want to get ahead of the curve and make sure that these kids are getting the support internally and externally, more heart-centered and mind-focused. We need both because balance is important in all of these areas as they proceed to grow to be hopefully positive contributing members of society.
that's all we ask for.
Right. So my last question to each of you, and then we'll cut this, is if you imagine little yous walked into the studio and you were teaching them your craft, what do you think you would need the most at this like age? Let's give it an age of like, I don't know, it's a really, really, like I feel like 5th grade is like a very important age. So like 9 years old, 9, 10, when you're like on the cusp of really like,
Yeah, you're on 10.
yeah, that's like when it's a tough year. So think back. I want you guys to transport yourselves back to that time of your life. Yeah, that was a tough time in my life. That's like the awkward middle school phase, you know, when you're like your feet are bigger than your whole body type of situation. And we don't know how to act.
The glow up was real, guys. The glow
Yeah.
up was real.
We're gonna insert
Pictures of herself.
I swear to God, my foot was like this big.
No, we're not. No, I can just picture me now.
So imagine that. Imagine what you most needed at that point in your life, and so how would you teach yourself, or what would you be as a mentor, as a teacher, be offering to that 9-year-old self?
We have to dive deep into this.
Yeah.
Let's get in. Welcome. Wow.
Oof.
Well,
9-year-old me. Jesus.
I was gonna say I haven't even started music at 10 years old yet. But,
I did. Oof.
well, maybe I could have found another creative outlet at that age. Yeah, I definitely do enjoy making music. And had I started sooner, I think I'd probably be a little bit more farther where I am. And I probably would have a better experience with it. And you said if you were to walk into UCMD, dang, that'll be life changing.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of resources here that a lot of these kids have that I didn't have growing up, and I always wish that I had. So when these kids come in here and I see some of them taking some of this stuff for granted, I'm like, wow, you don't even understand the position that you're in right now. Like, we have a whole built-in recording studio, and some
Tell
of
him,
these kids,
Anthony. Tell him.
we have a whole built-in recording studio. Pull up
Pull up to my job.
pull up to my job. And most of these kids take this stuff for granted, and it's kind of mind-boggling because, again, I didn't have this growing up. Everything that I learned was literally just me sitting down in my room and just putting the time into it. Had I been here, or had this been around when I was like 10 in fifth grade, definitely think my career probably would have skyrocketed way sooner, I think,
Right.
Yeah.
for sure.
So you'd tell yourself to take the opportunity.
I'll tell myself to take the opportunity. Opportunity.
He doesn't like reading, guys. I don't know.
Take the opportunity and just learn as much as I can creatively. I mean, I feel like once you understand how to, well, besides music, maybe take a dance class or two. I don't see what I don't think it would have hurt.
Expand your horizons.
Yeah, expand my horizon. Take an art class. Actually, I think I did take an art and a drama class when I was 10, but that's besides the point. Had I learned all of that at that age, I probably would have be a little bit more comfortable with myself and understand myself more at an earlier age. And honestly, who knows where I'll be right now? Probably wouldn't be sitting in the same seat. Yeah.
On a personal note too, right? Like more comfortable within yourself in general.
Yeah, more comfortable with myself in general. Yeah.
Damn, man. put me on the
9-year-old
spot.
Katrina
9-year-old Katrina.
walks
Jeez.
into UCMD.
Oh
like,
my
what
God.
You got?
I think I feel the same as Anthony. I started dance
Well, your daughter's
at
almost
9.
this age.
Well, yeah, my daughter's 8. She'll
Yeah.
be 9 in September. But yeah, 9-year-old me, I started dance at 9. But obviously it wasn't anything like UCMD. It was just, ballet, tap, jazz, your usual. So I think I would have done the same thing as Anthony. I walk in here, we have a recording studio, we have art classes. I would have probably picked up a guitar or some piano. I would have opened my options. Maybe, would have been more than just a dance teacher, which is good that my kids go here because my daughter is involved in, I think, every activity, everything that's here. And she loves it. Yeah. She absolutely loves this place. I feel like she loves this place more than she loves home, which is fine, I guess.
As it should be.
If I ask my kid
We do spend more time in school than home. Yeah. You should love it.
If I ask my kid at home or here, she's gonna pick UCMD. But for sure, I digress. Just like Ant, I would have opened my horizons. Also, funny story about UCMD. Madai and I were instructors together at UCMD.
That's true.
Many
we never
moves.
saw each other.
Correct. Like it was like we'd only see each other like the rehearsal and be like, "Hey, what's up?" Like, okay, that was it. Like we never crossed paths, which is
you were
pretty
on Saturday. I was on Friday.
pretty funny.
We never talked. Yeah.
I mean, if it does add any value, I definitely would say that I do feel at home when I'm here at UCMD. Again, just working with the kids and just being in a more creative space, I feel a bit more open to just express myself and just do more.
Yeah. And to be honest, like the studio being in my parents' home legitimately was kind of
Shout out to Madai's parents.
Mari.
Mari and Ever, they're holding it down.
Don't forget Abuela. Shout out to Abuela. We love her.
Shout out to Abuela.
I think the point, of it being, at first I was like, oh my God, like people come here and they're like, it looks like a house. And I was like, oh, every time I'd hear that, I kind of cringe because I want it to be. But now it's like part of the brand, which was not at all
Right.
like by design at first. But now I'm like, yeah, man, let's throw a couch in there. Let's play this up and it works, guys.
It does.
It freaking works. It works because even today when the kids came in for after school, I like dim the lights. I like put on the Vooks thing where it reads them a book on the TV, and like Olivia fell asleep. And I'm like, yo, that's honestly one of the biggest compliments. It's kind of like when a cat shows their belly, it's you know that the cat is comfortable. And I today was a huge win for me when Olivia curled up on the thing reading the book because it was like the free time before they start their homework, and I was like,
Aww. that she feels so comfortable to do that. It's
win,
crazy.
such a win. And I think that we do that so well, and that's where the receptivity comes in. But then you walk into school with the super hyper fluorescent lights, and it smells like milk cafeteria. Like you literally want to like crawl up, and like the whole environment is not conducive to learning. And we do that from A to Z, from the moment you enter our website, to enter the door, to how you're greeted, to how our teachers instruct you. It's home. And that, I think, is first and foremost important to the receptivity and how open any student is going to be on anything. Right?
For sure. 9-year-old?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been an interesting time because I had just moved. So I feel like something like UCMD would have been super great. I was definitely like starting to enjoy music more at the time. But yeah, I had just moved. Like I lost like all my friends. So coming to a music school would have been cool. It just would have been a chance to have like this little hub of one musical activity, make new friends, and it does feel very like homey here. So honestly, at the time too, I probably would have been in the after school thing as well because my parents were really busy. So I probably would like came here, definitely just like practiced a lot at this time. I think. I may have already had a piano here. There was a point in time where I didn't have a piano. I had like an organ that didn't have enough octaves. So as I was like getting, further and further, where songs were getting further, I would hit that part of the piano, like the wood. I would just hit it just to like practice the would be chord. And when my recitals were coming up, we would go to our friend's house, and me and my sister would practice on their piano. So having a place where I could come practice pretty much at any time. I also do love seeing that. I love, we have students here like Alex, like Pala, like after their classes or before, they're already here and they're like, hey, can I just play in that room, practice? I think that's great. I love seeing that because I would have totally done that all the time, especially as I was getting closer to like Alex's age, because that's when I really like, that's when music started to become more of my thing and not just like the thing I was put in. No, I would have loved to come here, and if I was teaching myself at that time, I would have definitely encouraged. And it's so funny because I already do that. I have gotten so many students to try something new or hard here. I didn't set out to be that kind of teacher, but I do it all the time. I'm like a really good shell breaker here. And I feel like I would have definitely needed that. Luckily, I didn't get that too much later. I definitely got that in Seeds. Like before Seeds, I was like super shy and super closed in, and Seeds definitely opened me up as a person. Thank God, because if I was like shy and vulnerable before I went to Xavier, I would have gotten like taken advantage of, probably bullied, like whatever the heck. Like Seeds gave me so much identity and like so much more integrity as a person, and maybe one day we'll talk about Seeds as well. But I definitely would have gotten that here before then, so it would have been to get that in 4th and 5th grade instead of 7th and 8th would have been fantastic. I think just for like my development, and not like musically, but also like as a person. So
wonderful. All right, just to wrap up, my quick little bit on that is Medaya at 9 needed a space. Right. I just needed a place, and my parents were busy. They were trying to make ends meet as immigrant parents, and here in the country, and I was kind of alone a lot because I just needed to be like with my grandma or some caretaker, because again, they couldn't afford a lot. So I think if I would have had a space, oh my gosh, if I literally could have just walked in somewhere that I felt had my back, here we're like, hey, like so and so, welcome. Oh my god, your hair, we're so invested.
Yeah, we really
we love you. Kids' lives, that if I just had someone else in my life like opening that space for me, oof. I think I really would have like taken advantage of it. And I like to end by saying that is why UCMD exists. I always ask, and the reason I ask you guys that question is because that's something I consistently ask myself. So when I'm like SEL, I'm like, little Medaya, what do you think about SEL? She's like, that sounds amazing. I'm like, great, let's do it. Right. But when that doesn't sit well with me, or like, let's do it in this way, and I ask my inner child this, and she's like, what? I'm like, all right, that doesn't sit well with me. And that's kind of how I intuitively guide it here. And I've mentioned this to you guys, and that's really true. It really means that we are here, and we are all part of the community, and we are all super passionate about what we do, and we look like these kids. We come from very similar families and backgrounds, and that's also really helpful to have someone that looks like you teaching you and being in a position where they can look up to us as role models and be like, oh, I can do other things with my life that's not just doctor and lawyer. What?
Or nurse.
Right, or teacher.
Respectable professions and necessary
Correct.
for society.
Shout out to my dad.
But
Love you.
not the like. We don't want
Not the
kids
only
to
route.
feel like
Not the
a
basic
failure
Right.
because they weren't like said thing.
Right. Or
Yeah.
like you initially started, just because you're book smart doesn't mean you're not smart.
Yeah.
Or not book smart. You know, just because you don't learn in this very rigid way does not mean that. It just means that you haven't found your zone of genius.
And that's where we thrive, helping kids find their zone of genius for sure.
Which we'll talk about in episode 3 of
Zones of
Can I Go to the Bathroom? Or is this on the test? Is that?
I don't know. Guys, help us vote. What should the
Honestly.
name of this podcast be?
Yo,
Is
really
this on the
doing
test?
this?
I like is this
Just
on the test?
Is this going to be on the
Is the
test?
Right. We could talk for days, but
We really
we'll
can.
split it up for you guys. Not all at once. Thank you so much. We're super excited to finally give birth to this project. I think we have a lot of great things to say, and our experiences collectively, individually, really bring value to this creative space, and we are happy to be here.
Yes.
I'm signing out.
Like, follow, and subscribe. Do not forget, come check out our website. Check us out.
Yes. Bye.